Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Muss Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of Building New York. Today my guest is Louis Dubin, the president and CEO of the Athena Group.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, Lou, you're 44 years of age. Where were you born?
I was born in Washington, D.C., and grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, right over the D.C. line.
And, you know, we were talking prior to the show. In reality, you're a fourth-generation developer. It was your great-grandfather. Tell me a little bit about him.
Well, my great-grandfather started building and developing in the Mid-Atlantic, in the Baltimore region, all the way up to Delaware, back before the turn of the century. And he got into the business as actually as an electrical contractor. He was originally in the gas mantle lighting business. Electricity became the new technology, and had some of the first dual system buildings in the world. So I guess he was a technological innovator back at the turn of the century, because he had both gas lighting and electric, and was one of the first electrical engineers.
And then your grandfather?
My grandfather had 9 brothers and sisters, 7 boys, 2 girls. 6 of the brothers went into the construction and development business, and of the 2 girls, both of their husbands went into the business. And the offshoot of that were multiple building and development companies. There was Meyerberg Brothers for many years. And then some of the younger brothers went into the supply business. For instance, when I started building and developing Masters Lumber, a big lumber company down in Maryland, was started by my great uncle to service his brothers in building their homes and apartments.
Okay, so now let's talk about your youth growing up. You lived in where?
I lived in Bethesda, Maryland, about 15 minutes from Georgetown, right down Wisconsin Avenue. A suburban, wonderful community.
Right, you went to public schools?
I went to public schools.
And during high school, when we were talking the other day, I think, I don't want to age ourselves, but there was the subject of Chinos, which were probably, that was pre-Gap situation. And you were selling Chinos from the car?
I was. It was a big deal. I had a cousin who had a friend who had a friend who could get factory seconds or second mill Chinos for very little. And there weren't a whole lot of discount stores back in the mid-'70s. And out of the back of my Volkswagen Rabbit, I always had anywhere from 50 to 100 pairs of Chinos.
You always had the right sizes, I hope. Yeah.
Well,
or the standard size. Okay.
People would try them on. I guess they'd go in the car and try them on, or know their size. I mean, we were pretty young kids. And I would sell those for $5 to $7 a pair. I think our cost was $1 or $2. and it was a way of making some good pocket change.
Right, and in addition, you worked in a deli, you were telling me.
I worked in a deli.
And also, I think with your father and your grandfather, you sometimes used to go down to the construction sites.
I did in the summer, even if I was going to camp or going away or doing something else, those gap periods, my family thought it was very important for me to always be working. So I worked construction on roofing crews or as a assistant punch-out person.
Did you carry a union card? You never got to the union card?
No, where I grew up, a single-family home building for the most part, it's non-union.
Okay.
There really aren't unions.
So you're 17 years of age, you graduate from high school, and as opposed to traveling all far away, your parents said, stay nearby, and you go where?
I went to Washington and Lee in Lexington, Virginia. Very good school, conservative school, about 3 hours from home.
All male?
All male at the time. Our class was the second last class to be all male. And I got a great education there. Very different.
And what did you major in when you were over there?
I majored in political science and had a wonderful liberal arts education there.
So you graduate college at 21 and you decide to go to law school. You go where?
I came back to Washington and went to the Washington College of Law at American University, and really was interested in both international law as well as the most parochial of all law, arguably, and that's local land use law. So I was fortunate at AU, we had one of the best international law programs, and we had a pretty good real estate subspecialty at AU. And I took a course concentration in international law and all the real estate courses that I could take.
And during the summers, I think I failed to say, during college and during law school, you clerked. You clerked for certain law firms.
I did. I was pre-law school. I clerked at an old Washington firm, O'Connor and Hannon. In law school, I clerked at Finley Cumble. I clerked at Liddowes and Blocker, which was a major land use firm in the Washington region, and a real estate firm. I also, my senior year, where I really was feeling that perhaps I wanted to go and build, I felt that was my calling, I got a job as an owner's rep building an office building. So instead of continuing the clerkage, continuing to clerk, because I had an offer to clerk for a judge, I actually decided to take a job as an owner's rep building a building for one of our local developers.
Okay, so now you're 24 years of age, and a lot of my past guests and a lot of my friends went to law school, but you didn't really want to practice law, but you did want to go for the bar.
Yes.
So you decided, as opposed to practicing law, you're going to take the courses for the bar, and then something happens to change your life. You had the opportunity to possibly get involved with Grandpa and Dad's business, but you find this piece of property. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, as builders and developers, we're a very independent breed. So, when you want to get started, and as I wanted to get started independently, I was looking around for a piece of property. That's the raw material. If you don't have the property, you can't build anything. So I was looking around, and this would have been 87, 88, for a piece of dirt that I could build houses on, single-family homes. I was fortunate. I found two gentlemen that had tied up a piece of property outside of Annapolis, Maryland, and they really wanted someone with a lot of energy to put up some of the capital as well and to work the deal.
Right. Now, was the property entitled? Were you able to build houses? Did they have the permits and all that?
The property was entitled. It was subdivided. It was right on the Chesapeake Bay. And it was about 24 home sites in phase 1, and I believe another 10, 12 home sites in phase 2. And it was so complete in terms of infrastructure that all you really needed to do was build the houses and put final blacktop on the asphalt.
Okay.
Even the street lights were in.
But, you had a little problem. I mean, you had a problem that you needed a little more education on doing deals, and you also needed some financial assistance. So let's talk about both sides of that. You went to your grandfather for some of the education, right? Tell my audience what you did with Grandpa.
I went to my grandfather, who had built and developed for, up at that point, maybe 60 years. And I said, how do you pro forma these jobs? How do you
make money?
Figure out how to make money at it? And as an old engineer, he pulled out a piece of graph paper. I mean, this wasn't a computer pro forma. And on a piece of graph paper, he painfully took me through every category and showed me how to figure out the budget or cost side of home building pro forma, and then one's carry on the pro forma. My father was very helpful in also giving me his viewpoint on how to calculate interest carry, which I still to this day can do in my head because it's a simple formula and doesn't require crunching 100 numbers like these brilliant young kids do, much better than I do, certainly. And from the two of them, I really learned their view on how they analyzed a piece of property and determined whether you could make money at it. And really,
so the determination was there that you could make money, but now you needed some additional financial assistance, and you went to your dad and you said, "Pop, lend me some money."
Absolutely.
Okay, and tell my audience, because it's such an interesting story, of your dad's comments and what he wanted you to do over the next couple of weeks, because at that time you were studying for the bar.
I was, and my father was very wise in his counsel. He very firmly believed that I had nailed the cost numbers, that I understood, what this was going to, what these homes were going to cost, and what the infrastructure completion costs were going to be. He had one of his construction people review all of that for me as well. But where he was a little nervous was how fast I was going to be able to sell it. Absorption is one of the most important things in our business.
Right, because things change. Look, today, the credit climate over here, you can build, but if you can't sell, it makes no difference.
If you can't
it's a big
sell,
problem.
you're going to lose money.
You're going to lose money, right.
People forget that. In a very good market, people just assume you're always going to sell 10, 20, 30 units a month, and that's just not reality.
So what does Lou Dubin do now?
So what I did was, I said, how can I get you comfortable, Dad, with absorption? Because this was a tertiary market outside of Annapolis, Maryland. He said, son, I'd really feel comfortable if you'd go and sit. And I want you to go to the nearest comp, which is only a mile away, nearest comparable project. Sit in your car while you're studying for the bar and count the number of cars and people that go in to visit the model. That'll be a good indication, the traffic they're getting, as to what their ultimate absorption rate could be. Because roughly, as a rule of thumb in our business, if 100 people come in your door, five of those 100 are ultimately buyers. Somewhere between 3 and 6%. And there are exceptions to that, but that's a good old home building rule, a suburban home building rule. So I sat and I counted. And I went for a full week and counted, and 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Was studying for the bar. I still remember those Barbary books to this day. It was not very comfortable in that car either. And came back to him that weekend and told him, Dad, the numbers are better than I even thought. They support a higher absorption rate than I'm running in my analysis. Would you lend me the money? He said, son, it could just be luck. Could just be an anomaly. I'd feel a lot better if you'd go another week. Just to round it out, you're asking to borrow some money from me, make me more comfortable. It's a lot of money for me. I, of course, said, Dad, if that's what you want, I'll go do it. I did it. And sure enough, that next week was even more traffic. I felt even better. I came in that Monday. I was sick of sitting in the car. And I said, Dad, I'd really like to borrow the money. And my father said, you know what, son? That last week, there was a holiday. It was a holiday weekend. You had an extra day of sales.
So it could have been a fluke.
It could have been a fluke.
Right.
So go one more week. I felt like he was testing me a little bit. He was. Went another week. Almost indignantly, I walked into his office just saying, the numbers are the same that they've been roughly the other 2 weeks. May I please borrow the money?
And now the interesting story, okay? So Dad said, okay, Lou, you talked me into it, but here's a check. And he said to you, what? This could be...
He said, this could be one of the most expensive postgraduate educations I'll ever provide. And with that, I smiled, I took the check and I ran. I mean, it would have been simpler for me just to have called him and wired the money, but we wouldn't have the same drama.
Okay, it's always that interesting on the first job. So let's fast forward over there. You do the job, it's completed, and then we really went into a cycle. We went into a difficult time in the real estate market in 88, 89, and you were working for on some of the properties, the rental properties that the family had been building. And then it's 1991. What happens? You were working...
91, we had really wound down any new construction activity because the lenders weren't lending, and our investors and our own capital, family capital, they really weren't looking to do more. Fortunate to have thousands of apartment units that my family owned, so I was doing some work with my father and grandfather in managing that, but not really fulfilled in doing that. Ultimately, I went to work. I was very fortunate to get a job at the Resolution Trust Corporation.
Right. And for my audience, tell us what the RTC was. I mean,
the RTC was the federal corporation that was the receiver for all the failed S&L assets, which included hundreds of billions of dollars in non-performing loans and real estate assets. It was the place to be that was really reinventing the
it was a good educational process. Great place to learn, meet people, find opportunities, and see things. Now, you were rather innovative over there. What happened? You were doing something with the land trust, correct?
Yeah, one of our biggest issues at the RTC was what do you do with illiquid and non-cash flowing land? And I'm not talking about parking lots. I'm talking about rock farms in West Texas and subdivisions where there's zero absorption in home sales and pieces of dirt that really didn't have cash flow attributes. So we were selling, the agency, or excuse me, the corporation was selling those assets at anywhere from 10 to 20 cents on the dollar, which seemed really awful. And we designed a program where the federal government was going to stay in as a limited partner for 50% of the ups, knowing that at some point these assets would recover, and if we had a good private sector general partner, we'd be able to protect and enhance the return for the taxpayer, because effectively the bailout was costing the U.S. taxpayer. And the program turned out to be extraordinarily successful because, as we all know, in the 90s, these assets recovered 2, 3, 4, 5, 10x. And the federal government had 50 cents on every dollar of that recovery in these programs.
So now Lou Dubin, 30 years of age, says, I got my education developing in Maryland, in Chesapeake. I got my education from the RTC, but I'm 30 years of age, and at that time you were married, I believe,
yes.
Correct? And you had been to New York, and you always liked New York, and you decided to create something called the Athena Group. Now, as I said to you prior to the show, why did you come up with the Athena Group? Was it a family? Was it something else? How did you come up with the name the Athena Group?
Well, we made the name, we created the name, but the reason we created the name, there were a number of other funds at the time, Odyssey, Apollo, Cerberus, that had Roman, Greek names. And I just really wanted to seem like we were one of those groups, even though, we were a brand new kid on the block.
Right, and this kid on the block basically was, there were 4 lead investors, would you say?
There were 4 lead investors. I managed to put together about $2 million of working capital.
One of them, you said to me, was your father-in-law?
One of them was my father-in-law, Alfred Taubman, who was a terrific mentor and friend, and was amazing.
Great real estate guy.
Not bad to have him.
Not bad to have him, right.
And decided, let's get started.
So you have $2 million, you have this fund, and you come to New York City. And what do you do?
Well, that's the first question I asked myself the first day I sat at my desk in New York. What do I do? What we did was, we had a particular, I teamed up with a fellow that was at LaSalle Partners, a young associate who I asked to come as a partner. And I brought my assistant from Washington with me as an analyst. And we decided that we would start looking at non-performing loans and REO that was owned by banks and other financial institutions that were not the RTC or FDIC.
Right, and one of the first things you did was something in Sparta and Laurel, New Jersey, from Mid-Atlantic National Bank.
Yes, we bought about 32 separate assets from Mid-Atlantic National Bank. That would have been late '93, early '94, and that really got us started. With 32 assets, we had a business. We brought in that early transaction, K. Hovnanian was a partner. Actually, they were a limited partner in the transaction. And more importantly, JP Morgan Investment Management really liked our business plan and agreed to put up 75 cents on the dollar. There was no debt to finance any of this stuff at that time.
So what do you do? Did you build houses on this property?
In many cases, we got property which we then finished infrastructure and then sold to home builders. In many cases, the land assets had houses on them, had model courts. So instantly, if we had 5 models, very often, we would sell 5 houses. We would sell 7 houses here. We would sell 6 houses there. So a lot of this land that was heavily marked down had infrastructure which was worth something in many cases, if it was done properly. And in other cases, you had houses that were either fully completed or partially completed.
Okay. So that's 94, Athena is founded, you do some projects, but I think the first project, because you've done so much of interesting projects in New York City and New Jersey, would be, it's August of '98. And tell me what happens, tell my audience about that.
August of '98, we had the opportunity to buy the Union of American Hebrew Congregations building at 65th and 5th. This is right across from Temple Emmanuel. Beautiful.
And Central Park.
And Central Park, and beautiful limestone facade. A 50s style office building that housed Jewish charities. And we had the opportunity to buy it. We were serving as a pro bono advisor for Edmund Soffer at the time. He was looking at that building to potentially put a synagogue there, Congregation Beit Yaakov. And we had a handshake that if this ended up as a synagogue, we'd be his pro bono real estate advisor, because we had done a good bit of work with the bank, with Republic National Bank, Mr. Soffer's bank. And if it ever went commercial, if it ever didn't work for the synagogue for whatever reason, we would be his or the congregation's partner on developing that building.
So what happened?
Didn't work. They couldn't get, the rabbis couldn't make the building work physically. They couldn't get the orientations they needed east. And the site was just deemed that it didn't technically fulfill their needs.
So your partner really was Edmund Soffer, who owned the property?
Yes.
And subsequently, he was a wonderful philanthropist. He gave the synagogue site to the site to the synagogue, and Athena and the synagogue, even though, built what?
We built 838 Fifth Avenue, which at the time sold for the highest price points in New York. We averaged about $22.50 a foot back in '99, 2000, shell and core.
And how many apartments were in this building? Did you knock the building down, or were you?
What we did was we actually did something more difficult than knocking it down. We kept the facade. We kept one bay. I think the bays were 25 feet. We kept one bay deep facade, and we knocked the entire, everything behind that facade down. We also had a piece of land behind that was about 20 feet on 65th Street. And we bought a no-style, a little apartment building. Behind that was about a 25-foot wider. We took all of that land, that no-style building, which we took down to the land, and literally rebuilt the entire building, including that new coverage of 45 feet to the rear. Landmarks also gave us approvals to go up in that building, and we put some additional height on the building as well.
And how many units were built over there? We
built 12 units, but every unit in the building is either 1 unit per floor or 1 unit per 2 floors.
Okay.
So they're large units.
So now you're on Central Park and 65th Street on the east side, and then it's about 2001, which was not a good time, right after the tragic events of 9/11, and you get another site called the Liberty Warehouse with the Statue of Liberty, an old Statue of Liberty. What happens over there?
Well, we closed on the deal in the summer of 2001, and by September 12th of 2001, like everyone else in town, we were scared of what the prospects were for this building or any building. We had originally designed the building with big units for families, and we really had a question, is this the right design? Post 9/11, will families be so quick to move back into the city? I remember it like it was yesterday. We went back to the drawing table for a few months, and we redesigned the building to accommodate smaller apartments in case families were moving back into the city slower.
Now, this was a warehouse. This basically was a storage warehouse.
100-year-old warehouse with the Statue of Liberty on top. We had about a 40-foot Statue of Lady Liberty. And after 9/11, there was no way we could do anything but preserve or conserve the statue. So we ultimately moved the statue to the Brooklyn Museum. We established a conservation fund for it. And today it's actually the focus point of their sculpture garden at the Brooklyn Museum. It's beautiful. For those of your viewers that haven't seen it, I encourage them. You can actually walk up into it with your kids and walk all the way to the top of Lady Liberty.
So you convert that building, that sells out as condominiums.
Yes.
And then your next project, so because we're trying to, now you're on the west side and about 65th Street.
Right off the park.
Right off the park. And now you go to Central Park North. Or
Yes.
really Harlem, but Central Park North. And what do you do over there, which is a project you're doing today?
Today we're building a 20-story building that luxury condominiums. Been very, very successful. We have a few units left. We had our first closing yesterday, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we wanted to execute a building that would truly be a gateway for the north part of the park, and I think we achieved that. We built a building with major outside spaces because you're on the park, major balconies,
So
we have a
that-
gym.
All right, so that's 48 units. Now you said, hey, I'm going back to my roots, because when Athena first started, they were in New Jersey. Now you're in Jersey City, AKA the Gold Coast, or as certain people say, the Sixth Borough. What are you doing over there, because we don't have much time?
In Jersey City, we're just completing a 34-story building right at First and Washington. Pretty much sold out as well. It's called the A. It's a terrific, terrific building. And right behind that, we're starting first quarter, 450 residential units with BLDG, the Goldman family. They're our partners. So we'll be starting that first quarter.
Are you building a new building, or are you just...
We're going to be building a new building behind that. And then Jersey City 3, Rem Koolhaus, the world-famous designer, has designed a 54-story building for us, which will be starting early '09.
Okay. So the interesting, because we really don't have much time, you're continuing to do that, and as you said to me, you started with $2 million in seed capital, and today you have $1 billion in construction, $2 billion in planned work over there. But I have to get this. Your mentors?
Mentors. My grandfather, my father, and Alfred Taubman.
Okay. And the best thing, you have an 11-year-old who hopefully, she loves coming to meetings. She'll be the 5th generation of builders. No question.
Absolutely, one of my
Okay.
great hopes.
You truly have been a builder in New York, and I hope you continue for many years to come.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, just sit here.
Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Musk Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.